It is Memorial Day weekend, and Republicans on Capitol Hill just handed the White House a humiliation that nobody saw coming on this scale. Not Democrats, not the media, not even Republican senators themselves, who say they were completely blindsided. The Senate was supposed to pass a $72 billion immigration enforcement package before leaving for recess. It was supposed to be a clean win for this administration. Border funding, ICE expansion, a show of force before the holiday weekend. That's what the schedule said. Instead, Republican senators stormed out of a closed-door meeting Thursday, canceled all the votes, and left Washington for Memorial Day without passing anything. One senator called the whole situation a payout pot for punks. That line alone tells you everything about where the Republican Party is tonight. I've been tracking this story all week. Let me show you exactly what happened, why it matters beyond the political embarrassment, and what it reveals about the growing fracture inside the party that this White House thought it had fully under control. Here's where this started. 3 weeks ago, a federal lawsuit involving the IRS was settled. Tucked into the resolution of that case was a directive. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche was instructed to establish what the administration is calling an anti-weaponization fund. The premise behind it is that the previous Justice Department was used as a political weapon against Trump allies, January 6 defendants, conservative organizations, and anyone the Biden administration wanted to target. The fund carries a price tag of $1.776 billion in taxpayer money, and the structure of it is the part that broke the Senate this week. Under the administration's proposal, Blanche himself would appoint 4 of the 5 commissioners who decide who gets paid out from this fund. The 5th commissioner would be appointed with input from congressional leaders. That's it. That's the oversight mechanism for nearly $1.8 billion in taxpayer funds. 1 attorney general, 4 hand-picked commissioners, virtually no external accountability. And when Republican senators found out the details, several of them didn't just push back, they erupted. Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina made his position clear before he even walked into the briefing. He said he would vote against the entire reconciliation bill if the fund stayed in. Senator Susan Collins, who is already facing a difficult re-election in November, told reporters directly that acting Ag Blanche had not convinced her of anything. Her exact words were that she does not support the fund as described, and she was specific about why. She said she does not believe people who were convicted of violently assaulting Capitol Police officers on January 6th should be entitled to reimbursement of their legal fees. That's a Republican senator in 2026 using her own public platform to say she will not sign off on compensating people who attacked police. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who just lost his primary race after Trump endorsed his opponent against him, went further. He put out a statement Wednesday night and the language was pointed. He said people are worried about their mortgage, their groceries, their gas, not about assembling a $1.8 billion fund for the president and his allies with no legal precedent and no accountability. And then he said if there needs to be a settlement, the administration should bring it to Congress to decide. That's not dissent. That's a structural argument. Cassidy is saying the executive branch does not have the authority to unilaterally create and control a nearly $2 billion taxpayer fund without any legislative input. But that's a separation of powers argument coming from inside the Republican conference. Former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell didn't hold back either. He publicly criticized Blanche for asking Republican senators to support a fund that could end up compensating people who beat law enforcement officers with flagpoles and doused them with bear spray. Those are McConnell's words. When you have Tillis, Collins, Cassidy, and McConnell all publicly opposing the same proposal in the same week, you don't have a fringe revolt. You have a significant chunk of the Senate Republican Conference refusing to move. And the meeting where this all came to a head tells you what the atmosphere was actually like. Senate Majority Leader John Thune had planned to start votes on the immigration package Thursday. Senators went into a closed-door briefing with DOJ officials expecting answers. They came out with more questions, no consensus, and complete chaos. Thune canceled the votes. He told reporters that the administration needs to help identify a solution because there are too many members with concerns. Then he added 3 words that became the headline. He said, "That's a big issue." The Senate then left for Memorial Day recess without passing anything. Leaving Washington, no vote, no deal, no bill. There's something important to understand about the political mechanics of what just happened. The immigration enforcement bill was supposed to be a reconciliation package, meaning it required only a simple majority. Republicans have 53 seats. They had the votes on paper. The fund didn't require a vote by itself. It was attached to a bill that did. And the fund's presence in the broader legislative environment created enough GOP revolt that the entire vehicle collapsed. Democrats understand exactly what that means. Chuck Schumer didn't miss the moment. He said Republicans tied themselves up in knots over what he called Trump's brazenly corrupt slush fund. And Dick Durbin put a bigger frame around it when he asked publicly on May 21st, 2026, whether Republicans had finally found an ethical bridge too far. That's the Democratic argument, and the fact that Republican senators are not pushing back on the characterization is itself a signal. Now, there's a deadline problem layered on top of all of this. Trump had publicly set June 1st as his target for the Senate passing the immigration package. They left town Thursday without a vote. The Senate comes back from Memorial Day recess June 1st. That means the deadline and the return date are the same day, which means either this gets resolved the moment senators walk back through the door, or the deadline passes without action. Neither outcome is comfortable for the White House. The administration's posture Thursday night was predictable. They pushed the framing that this is a temporary delay, that the votes are there, that the June 1st timeline is still achievable. But senators who were in that closed-door meeting described something very different. They described an administration that came in expecting to answer questions and left without having resolved the core problem. The problem isn't procedural. The problem is substantive. Republican senators believe the fund is legally questionable, potentially unconstitutional, and politically radioactive in an election year. Several of those senators are up in November. The midterms are already in the background of every calculation being made on Capitol Hill. Voting to fund a $1.8 billion pot controlled by one attorney general, which could flow to January 6 defendants who attacked police, is not a vote any senator facing a competitive race wants to be on record for. The White House has a week to solve a problem that is simultaneously legal, political, and structural. They need to either restructure the fund with enough congressional oversight to bring senators back on board, strip it out of the conversation entirely, and absorb the political hit of backing down, or find a path where the reconciliation bill moves forward without touching the fund and figure out the fund separately. None of those options is clean, and none of them gets resolved over a holiday weekend when senators are home in their states. 3 things to watch when Congress returns June 1st. Whether the administration comes back with a revised fund proposal that includes genuine congressional guardrails, anything short of that will not bring Collins, Tillis, or Cassidy back. They've been too public and too specific in their objections. Whether Democrats successfully attach amendments targeting the fund when the reconciliation bill comes back to the floor. The bill includes $1.5 billion for the Justice Department, which creates a direct procedural path for Democrats to offer amendments at a simple majority threshold. That's a tactical problem the administration has to solve, or the bill becomes a political minefield on the floor. And third, whether this episode produces any lasting change in the dynamic between Senate Republicans and the White House. This wasn't one senator raising a quiet concern in a private meeting. This was multiple senators on the record in public using language like slush fund, payout pot for punks, and no legal precedent. That kind of public break doesn't just evaporate because a deal eventually gets made. The administration spent this week expecting a legislative win heading into Memorial Day. Instead, they got a public revolt from their own party, a collapsed timeline, and a debate about whether the Justice Department has been turned into an instrument for compensating political allies at taxpayer expense. There's a version of this where the June 1st deadline gets met and the bill passes with enough modifications to bring the holdouts along. There's also a version where this drags into June, the dynamics harden, and the immigration enforcement package becomes another casualty of the administration's struggle to control its own legislative agenda. What this week confirmed is that the loyalty Senate Republicans showed this White House during the first stretch of this term is not unconditional, and that some of the most exposed members of that conference are starting to calculate independently. Stay with this story. The next 72 hours are the holiday. June 1st is when this comes back to a head, and I will cover that vote the moment it happens.